This is Greatest Hits Radio Drive Time, playing Changes, David Bowie. And into the confessional collective, Brother Matthew is looking jaunty in his pale t-shirt. What is that? What t-shirt is that?
It's a t-shirt with a wave on it.
Okay, with a sort of Japanese flavour.
Yeah.
Very jaunty.
Very.
And Sister Susie joins us live from Bristol's finest pub. What is our drink of the day?
Well, I haven't really thought of one, but I did have a very nice Tom Collins cocktail at the weekend. So maybe I'll recreate that because it's very sunny here and it's lovely.
And is Tom Collins the person who invented it?
Yeah, I think it is. I think, he was the first person that brought it all together originally.
All right. Can I have a Baileys? I can have a Baileys for
Baileys and lemonade. Lovely.
Thanks very much. Okay, this week's first smart speaker goes to Frank, who sends in tonight's confession. Thank you, Frank. Father Simon, many years ago, in 1981 to be precise, I was a fine upstanding member of Her Majesty's Constabulary in a small sleepy town in the north of England. The station was small, there was an inspector, 2 sergeants and 8 constables. Between us, we covered 24/7. As a young constable in a small town, one of my many duties was to do the occasional talk at local schools. Partly this was to show a friendly face of the force and demonstrate that the public can turn to us, safe in the knowledge we'll protect them. Anyway, I was booked to do a talk with the local primary school. My whole routine usually went down very well, and I would invariably end up at some point being accosted by a parent who would tell me how wonderful the lesson was. Only one day, it didn't quite work out the way it was supposed to. I had booked in said school for 10:30. My shift started at 5:30 in the morning. No sooner had I been briefed and walked out of the door of the police station that the first in a string of things and incidents occurred. It was the first really warm day of the year, and as I walked out of the station, I realised it was going to be too hot for my tunic and that shirt sleeves would be a better bet. So I took my tunic off back at the station locker room, and a call came in reporting a serious accident. I grabbed my notebook and ran to the awaiting police car and was off to protect life and create order out of the early morning chaos. Once everything was cleared up at the accident, time was ticking on closer to the appointed hour for the lesson at school. As I was leaving the scene of the accident, a local shop rang to say they'd been burgled. So off to the shop I went to see if there were any clues and fill out a report. Having completed all the paperwork, I finally headed back to the police station. But as I pulled away from the curb, an old woman collapsed.
Wow.
It's like they're all
going on.
Ganging up against
like
me.
The bill.
I looked at my watch. It was almost 10. Was I going to make the lesson at the local school? Anyway, I got out of the car, ran over to the woman. I called for an ambulance, did my best to make her comfortable, find out who she was, and arrange for a next of kin to be informed over the radio. Anyway, with my head full of accidents, burglaries and illnesses in the street and not wanting to let Class 4B down, I set off for the school direct from the scene of this latest incident. I arrived in the nick of time. Now, I had developed a particularly amusing routine, I think.
Really?
Where I would ask for volunteers to come forward and try out my handcuffs. I would choose a little girl and a little boy and handcuff them together.
Okay.
I would then pretend that I had lost the key and say something like, I hope you like each other, because you're going to have to get married now. Much to the mirth of the rest of the class and the delight of the teacher before producing the key with a flourish, which was kept on the end of my whistle chain and unlocking the relieved pair who could sit back down with a story to tell their parents at home that afternoon. You can guess where we're heading.
Yeah.
This lesson went out as planned until the moment it came to handcuff the 2 hapless 7-year-olds. The handcuffing went well, no injuries, everyone laughing at my little joke as normal. However, as I reached for my whistle chain and the attached handcuff key, I had a sudden blood-draining moment where I realised said chain and key was not in my pocket as expected. My mind went back to the first moments of my day back in the station. Oops, the chain and key must still be in my tunic. I looked in panic at the teacher, who was now not smiling. I got onto the radio to see if anyone else was around with a handcuff key. No such luck. Everyone was busy or miles away. I explained that I'd be back in about 20 minutes with the key. I set off, leaving 2 handcuffed children in the care of their teacher, who, to be honest, were looking a little worried. Actually, that's an understatement. They looked terrified.
Yeah.
I got to the station okay, retrieved the chain and the key, and was just running out of the station when a man approached me. This is the most ludicrous thing. A man approached me and asked me where the nearest railway station was. Now, this is not a big thing, right? Well, normally no, but today I recognised him as a wanted felon from the next town.
Wow.
We'd been hunting him for some time. I couldn't believe my luck, so I arrested him, dragged him into the station. Anyway, to cut a long story short, once all the paperwork had been done, time had passed, and in all the excitement, I'd forgotten what my original mission was.
Oh, no.
It wasn't until I released it wasn't until I realised, with dawning horror, I didn't have my handcuffs that I remembered the two children securely locked together at the schoolroom across town. I arrived back at the school sometime later. I'd rather not say how much later, but safe to say there were two children sat beside each other in the dining room, eating lunch with opposite hands, crying and being comforted by a small army of teachers, dinner ladies and assistants, with all the other children looking on in pity or mirth. One of the two. So to the two children, who I imagine are now fully grown up and probably have their own children, I would like to say sorry. I often wonder how much therapy they had to go through over the years due to the trauma of that day. To the jury and justices of your confessional, I believe there were extenuating circumstances, but I accept full responsibility and throw myself on the mercy of the court in the hope that I can get some respite from the guilt that has been with me all these years and into my retirement. It was some time before I was invited back to do my little lesson, and I had to drop the handcuffing scene.
Yeah.
More is the pity, because I thought it was very, very funny. It always went down well, apart from this time when I handcuffed the kids together.
Yes.
Sister Susie from the pub.
Well, Frank, you know, you had a busy day, and it might have been a long time ago, but I still don't think it's okay. It's extenuating circumstances sound to me like my dog ate my homework. I feel like you just forgot. And because you forgot, I can't forgive you. There were two children there, should never have done it in the first place. I'm not forgiving
I like
you.
the idea of the two 7-year-olds chained together and eating lunch with opposite hands.
Obviously.
Brother from another gutter.
It was all kicking off for Frank, wasn't it? Everything was
What a
happening.
day,
Wow,
what a day.
What a day. I'm going to forgive, and here's the reason why. Number one, those kids are going to have had a story. They will have dined
That's
out
true.
on that story for years afterwards. I'm sure everyone looks back at it and laughs now. And the other is, I've watched Starsky and Hutch, and apparently you just use a paperclip. Apparently that works on Starsky and Hutch. So why did no one use a paperclip? That would be my advice.
Okay.
So yes, definitely forgiven.
People's verdict, please. I know, he forgives everything, as you know, Sister Susie. Do you forgive Frank, the retired copper? Yes or no? 61054 on the text. Please start your message with Simon. That would be a very nice thing. 61054. A while back, we had tonight's confession, first of the week, from PC Frank.
Yes.
From somewhere in the north of England, who had a handcuff story. Well, he was trying to entertain the kids, but he'd just forgotten the key.
Oh, dear.
That's all, resulting in a couple of 7-year-olds. Our guess is probably cuffed together for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
That's what we're thinking. Anyway, the people's verdict is in, and it's like this.
Most people forgiving. Kate in Kilburn says those kids would have had the ideal excuse to get out of PE that day. I'd have been overjoyed to sit in the canteen all day, as long as the person I was handcuffed to wasn't a total bore.
Oh, that's true.
Alex in Cambridgeshire says forgiven. Hilarious confession, but Frank would have made the kids think that their local police were about as sharp as their truncheons. I'll forgive because of all the great police work he did that day. And finally, Emma in Sussex says, what a great confession. Brilliantly told. There are a fair few children in my class that I'd like to handcuff together and then accidentally lose the key.
Very good. Okay, so if you have a confession and we use it, then you get a smart speaker. So Frank gets today's smart speaker. Thank you, Frank. If you think you've got a confession for us, maybe it's a police confession. Obviously, it all has to stay within the bounds of things that are legal, decent and honest. We'd love to hear it. You send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. It's confession time. We go one more time to the... Well, I say one more time, not for the last time.
No.
Live to the pub where Susie's in charge. Is it been busy in the pub tonight? Or what?
No, it's been quiet because everyone is outside in the sunshine.
That's right. Okay. So what is our drink of the day then? What would you be recommending?
Well, I think a nice gin and tonic would be good for this heat,
Oh,
wouldn't it?
yes.
Oh, okay.
Gin and tonic on a Tuesday, I
Ice
think
and a
so.
slice?
Ice and a slice.
Okay.
Yeah,
very
That'll
good.
do.
why not?
Okay. All right. I think you're going with the grain there. Today's confession comes from Maggie, who gets today's smart speaker. She has a very condensed writing style, and in the opening sentence, you will have already made your judgment.
Oh,
That's
right.
what I'm thinking. Hi, Simon. I'm Maggie. Here is my confession. I'm guessing many of your listeners have a similar story to tell. My partner was made redundant whilst I was pregnant, so to treat himself, he bought a very expensive £400 jumper made of some fancy wool. There you go. There-
400 quid on a jumper.
there you go, instantly.
Buying a jumper.
So, he's not even celebrating the fact that his partner's pregnant. Anyway, my partner is Jeremy, and I just think that you need to know all of these facts. You might wonder about the financial wisdom being exhibited here.
Yeah.
Do you need a new jumper? And if so, maybe a cheap one would be wise. No, you want a top designer-style jumper? Ah, carry on, you know best. So he wore it once and he loved it. I then had our son. The first week after the little one was born, my partner wore his jumper a second time and put it in the wash basket. Being the loving mother and partner, I did the washing that week after giving birth.
Okay.
Can't think why.
Yeah.
And I didn't check what I had washed before I put it in the tumble dryer. I mean, what with everything you can imagine that I wasn't... Anyway. You might think that he would do his own laundry, what with the babe in arms and everything, but that was not his way. When I got to emptying the dryer, I pulled out an item that looked like what could only be described as a piece of fuzzy felt. For younger listeners, this was a fabric toy which had a flocked backing board, and you stuck felt shapes onto it to make a farmyard, a zoo, or a spaceship or something. I think I missed most of that.
Yeah.
The shapes were made of thin, compressed fabric, nice for making an animal scene, but not really for wearing, especially if you spent a fortune that you didn't have on the latest style jumper. At the time, I couldn't work out what this thing I'd pulled from the washing machine was. So I checked the tag and then realised it was the £400 jumper that my partner had worn only twice. I tried to soak it in fabric conditioner and all the other tricks I looked up online. I stretched it, pulled it, trod on it, tugged it, rolled it, swung it round and round, but to no avail. I eventually gave up, and in my head I thought, well, it will fit my son when he's about 6.
Yeah.
And I've hid it away in my new chest of drawers. So many people are going, I've done that. I have absolutely done that. For weeks afterwards, Jeremy couldn't work out what had happened to his jumper and kept asking if I'd seen it. I just kept telling him that it must be somewhere. I eventually confessed to my mum, who burst out laughing and said, you can never show him that. He'll go bananas. Well, after 3 months, 3 months after the unfortunate shrinking, my mum had come to visit. And Jeremy came in to say he was looking for his jumper again. Well, my mum looked at me and laughed and said, you better tell him. Firstly, thanks, Mum. I had sworn you to secrecy. My partner then wanted to know what was happening. So I told Jeremy I had some good news and some bad news. The bad news is...
Go on.
His jumper got shrunk the week after the boy was born, but the good news is the newborn babe has a £400 jumper to wear when he's about 6. Well, Jeremy wasn't impressed, and my mum couldn't stop laughing. It's fine for her. My son is now 5. It's still a tad big for him, and my partner, Jeremy, still to this day, says if he can't find an item of clothing, he assumes that I've hidden it. It's like he's on Law and Order. Also, while I'm here, he still hasn't found his favourite red silk briefs. Or his favourite skin-tight jeans.
Oh,
I mean, you're not a teenager, mate. Both of these items are at the back of the chest of drawers and also about half the size they're supposed to be. But maybe if he's got a complaint, he can do his own washing. I know I came clean because of my mum, but if I had it my way, I would never have said anything, and I'd have just produced our son in the garment when he was 6. I think I need forgiveness because I would happily still be carrying this on 5 years after the event. Yours, not very repentant, Maggie, with today's story. And I suspect that there are a lot of people that have laundry stories tucked away somewhere, and they'll have a drawer where either they've messed up the washing or their children have clothes that they don't like very much. And your red trousers, I haven't seen them for ages at the bottom, right at the bottom. I'm not saying that that's happened in our house or anything like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Sister Susie, the voice of responsibility.
Well, Maggie, I thought that was a very great story. I've got a couple of things who I don't forgive. I don't forgive Jeremy. He should have done his own washing to start with. Also, he should have done his own washing anyway. Never mind the fact that you've just had a baby. If there's any time to do the washing in the house, maybe that is the time. And I also don't forgive your mum either because she shouldn't have dobbed you in. It was a secret. I would have kept it with you, Maggie, I promise. But Maggie, I do forgive you because he shouldn't have spent that much money on a jumper anyway. Not when he was made redundant. That's just silly.
My partner was made redundant while I was pregnant, so to treat himself, he bought an expensive jumper.
Treat himself. Should have treated you, Maggie.
Brother from another gutter.
Yes, I'm going to go with Susie on this one. I mean, I'm quite apart. Let's not even address the red silk pants. What's that about?
Oh, we've all got those.
No, I don't think so. Who can't do that? It's not rocket science. Put it on mixed fabrics. Who can't do their own washing up? And also, 400 quid for a jumper. What's it made of? Saffron? Well, dreams? Saffron. What? So it's 10 times as much as you would ever pay for a jumper.
All right.
Definitely forgiven.
Okay, the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Maggie, yes or no? 61054, first word is Simon. Just before 6, our confession came from Maggie. It was all about her partner Jeremy's £400 new jumper, which got mangled in the wash. Anyway, and a whole set of shenanigans which came from that one. And I suspect she's going to get forgiven.
Yeah, you're right. Sarah from Devon says, the confession hasn't even finished, and I'm already forgiving.
Yep.
Maggie, I can completely relate. Diane in Leicester, if there was ever a time to learn to do the washing, it's when your partner's had a baby. I agree with Sister Susie. And Joe and Cindy in Wells say, forgiven. He's lost his senses paying 400 quid for a jumper and owning red silk pants. The shock was probably what he needed.
If you have a confession, maybe it's a laundry-based confession, we'll take anything. If we use it, you get a smart speaker. Confessions, Greatest Hits Radio. It was fine before. I'm just going to go on. I think we're just going to have to keep going. And in the hope that Susie is in there somewhere.
I'm sure the line's just sorting itself out.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Okay. She was there earlier when I...
She was.
When I tried. Anyway.
Yeah.
So today's confession comes from Dennis. Dennis, thank you very much indeed. So you get the smart speaker, even though you're not called Dennis. The 90 question took place, Father Simon, in a town in northern England during the early 1980s. My name is Dennis, and my younger brother is Walter. Pre-global warming, the summers were hot and the winters were cold, where it snowed every year. This is all rubbish, but anyway, never mind. It was during one such winter's night, we kept this for a warm day,
All right.
when the snow blew horizontally down our residential street, coating everything in sight within minutes. Being an inquisitive youngster, I decided to open my mum and dad's bedroom window and have a look out. I know this was stupid, but the temptation was too much. Turned out the snow is cold and wet and it was very windy. I never knew that. As I stood there holding what I thought was tightly to the window bar, it was an old-style wooden frame, a sudden gust of wind whipped it out of my hand and crashed against the side of the house. In total amazement, I noticed the glass hadn't smashed and was thanking my lucky stars until I tried to shut the window and I realized that the force of the bang had caused the wooden frame to distort it and it wouldn't close. It did not fit back into the frame. In total panic, I looked around, realizing I could hear my younger brother Walter in the next bedroom. Calling him quietly so as not to alert Dad, he dutifully appeared. He's a younger brother after all. Help me please, I begged. Just hold this while I go and find something to fix the window. Please, please, I begged. Dad will kill me if I don't. He agreed, and I shot up to the loft, returning with a file, which I hoped would help. I filed away, trying to flatten the thing, but nothing happened. File, 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 I went. Anyway, to my horror, absolutely nothing happened. A devious plan suddenly appeared in my head. So I asked my younger brother to keep hold of the frame whilst I found something else. Unbeknownst to him, however, I ran down the stairs and told my dad that Walter had damaged the window and was upstairs trying to fix it. Oh, I heard a chortle from the pub.
Yes.
Is that producer Susie there?
It is, yeah.
Okay, very good. Just checking. Anyway, you joined us just in time for Dennis betraying Walter.
I heard the whole thing. I don't know why you couldn't hear me.
Oh, I see. Beg your pardon. I'm sure it was my fault. Anyway, so I had this devious plan, and I told my dad that Walter had damaged the window and was upstairs trying to fix it. He still talks today, does Walter, about the guttural roar he heard from downstairs and how our dad got up the stairs, all 13 of them, in one leap. Probably didn't happen. What I didn't know was that during my utter betrayal, the wind had whipped the window out of his tiny, weedy little hand and totally ripped it off. As Dad and I entered the bedroom, Walter just stood there with the frame resting on the bedroom floor, his hand still on the latch with an absolute look of horror on his face. A superhuman effort, I thought. I was impressed he'd managed to do it. But by now, there were veins rapidly popping outside of our dad's necktie.
Wow.
The language that followed was something to behold, words as a teenage boy I had barely ever heard. The next few weeks for Walter were horrendous. He lived in his bedroom on bread and water, something like that.
Yeah.
And despite his continual cries of innocence, he was not believed, nor helped by the insistence that I had that he was lying. In my opinion, my acting was worthy of an Oscar. 40 years on, and after the passing of both our parents, I still hadn't confessed, and both went to the grave not knowing the truth.
Ah.
Okay. So today I am asking for forgiveness from my brother, not for telling a lie in the first place, because that's sibling rivalry for you. I needed to save my own skin after all, but for not even telling my dad before he left us, and wouldn't have been bothered by then, of course, and would have seen the funny side, because here's the final kicker. I was always definitely his favourite.
Yeah.
So please, kind team and listeners, give me the absolution for my sins. Okay, right. Well, let's see where we go in providing the absolution stakes. That was neat, I thought. Sister Susie, who can hear us loud and clear, what do you say to Dennis?
Dennis, I can't forgive you because I am the youngest of three, and
yes.
if my brothers and sisters did that to me, I just wouldn't have it. It's not very happy. And the fact that you thought you were the favourite, no chance. Not forgiven.
Yeah, will depend on where you are in the pecking order, as ever. Brother Matthew.
Well, I'm the eldest, and it feels like the natural order of things for the eldest to be the favourite, so I'm absolutely in Dennis's corner on this one. I mean, really, Walter should have been able to hold on to the window. That's all he had to do, hold on to the window.
But he's got tiny, weedy hands.
Well, yes, not good enough, Walter. Should have held on, and frankly, it just feels to me like, them not believing Walter either. Natural order of things, unlucky sunshine,
okay.
Definitely forgiven.
So it's the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Dennis, yes or no? On the text, 61054, first word is Simon. That'll be a nice thing, thank you. Just before the news, a confession from Dennis about how he got his younger brother Walter into all kinds of trouble by blaming a smashed up window frame on him. In fact, he went downstairs and told Dad and said, look what Walter's done. Anyway, the people's verdict now, probably depending on where you are in the pecking order.
Correct.
What do they say?
That's absolutely where forgiveness depends. Linda in Knutsford, absolutely not forgiven from a middle child who always had a hard time because of a brutal big sister. Diane in Totnes, forgiven. What else are younger siblings for if not taking the blame? Eldest child makes the rules. And Rachel C says, Dennis is not to be forgiven. Shocking that he never owned up to this. Poor Walter. He definitely owes his little brother. And anyway, everyone knows that the youngest in the family is always the favourite.
Right, but you didn't quite read that as though you meant it.
No.
I thought. So maybe you've thought... Anyway, so Dennis gets the smart speaker. If you fancy one, send us a confession. Maybe a sibling rivalry. Maybe you had parents who had a favourite. Maybe you were the favourite. Maybe you didn't like your brother because he was the favourite. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. And now, yesterday this time, we thought that we had a secure line to producer Susie in the pub, and then it kind of all disappeared. So let's just check in. Hello, producer Susie.
Hello?
Hey!
Very, very good.
First time.
You deliberately left a very long pause there just to get us slightly worried. So what is our drink of the day, please?
Well, it's really warm here, so I'm going to say a nice lager shandy would hit the spot. Quite
Okay,
nice.
would you go for a half or would you go for a pint?
Half a lager shandy is hardly worth bothering. Half a lager shandy.
And what you can do, here's the tip as well.
Yes.
If you don't like a lemonade shandy, you could get a non-alcoholic beer and put that in and then have that as well.
Okay, so half a non-alcoholic beer and lemonade.
No!
Just
half
the water,
a non-alcoholic
thanks.
beer and half an alcoholic beer.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So
this
the
is very
shandy
good.
with the non-alcoholic
Oh,
beer
I
instead of
see.
lemonade.
This is a whole
right.
new feature. Anyway, today's I'm glad that's clear. Today's confession comes from Bryony. Simon, I would like to confess my sins to you all. Let's call me Bryony.
Yep.
Says Bryony. This dates back to the early 90s when I was a carefree 20-year-old. I used to frequent one of the two nightclubs in our lovely town. Every weekend it would be one or the other. My friend and I knew quite a few people, so we'd have a cheap night out, as our usual trick would be, let's go and talk to him to get a drink out of him, and then we can say goodbye. We were strutting our stuff on the dance floor, probably to 2 Unlimited or something similar, all the rage back in the day. I seem to remember this. When we ended up dancing with a couple of lads. Anyway, I ended up giving him my telephone number. The landline was all we had then, thank heavens. Anyway, I couldn't really remember what he looked like the next day.
Okay.
It's the lager shandy.
Yeah.
But my friend described him as a geeky-looking bloke. Right. A few days later, whilst at home, I was in my room, and my dad shouts up to me, "Here, Bryony! There's a bloke called Nigel on the phone." Well, who's that? Oh, I don't know any Nigels. It's the geeky lad who was at the nightclub. So, do you fancy going out for a drink? He asked. I was very quiet back then. I didn't want to say no. Yes, I said, okay. I'll pick you up on Saturday then, he said. Oh, no, I thought I'm going to have to go out with him now. Well, you had just said yes, so I guess you
how
do.
it works.
Kind of how it works.
Yeah. He picked me up and we went to the pub. I immediately was put off him by his very dull brown shoes.
Oh, dear.
And he had 2 very large red marks on his nose where his glasses had been.
Wow.
I have to say, Father Simon, anything used to put me off back then. Also, I have to say he was quite boring and I couldn't wait to get home.
Okay. Starting to lose patience with Bryony.
At the end of the night, he dropped me off and he said, how about another date? How about next Saturday? Because I didn't want to say no to his face, I said, oh, okay then.
Oh, right.
Why did I say yes? Anyway, the day before, he calls me to check that I was still okay for the date, and I still said yes. Great, he said, I'll pick you up at 8 o'clock. Okay, I'll see you then.
My goodness.
I mean, you know, I thought, I really, really don't want to go on this. Well, why did you? Anyway.
Don't say yes, then.
Exactly. On the Saturday afternoon, I decided that I really, really didn't want to face another date with my boring man with red marks on his nose and dodgy, boring shoes. So I called up my friend and I explained to her what was happening. And could I actually go round and pick her up so that I wouldn't be at home when he came to collect me? It would just be easy if he'd said no, really, anyway. So I went round, I picked her up, and we parked at the bottom of the opposite road to where I lived with full view of my house. We sat and watched him drive to my house, knock on the door. I thought my dad must have said, oh no, she's out, because then when we watched him, he was crestfallen, and he got back in his car and he drove away. And we were laughing at him in his car. Apparently my dad, Ray, actually said, let's say Simon is from the East End. Apparently when he calls it...
Oh, I see.
Nigel, is it? Listen, mate. A word to the wise. You need to smarten up. You need some decent shoes if you're going to call round at my ass. And ask for my daughter. All right. Also, mate. Also, word of advice. Try to be less boring. Just lighten up. Lighten up and lose those annoying marks on your nose while you're at it.
Oh.
Got it? Off you go.
Me.
Off you go, sunshine. Shut it. Anyway, I just made that bit. He didn't actually say that. Nice one, Dad, says Bryony. He understood and he'd obviously heard me talking about him. However, I do realise that I now need to ask for forgiveness. As I now know that I should just have said no there and then. I shouldn't have led him up the garden path. Or even when he called me to double check, maybe that was the moment that I should have said no. And then we sat and we watched it all. It was very cruel, but I was very timid at the time. I hope that I can be forgiven so that I can stop feeling bad that he had driven from another town to pick me up for nothing. But he was boring. Funny, though, he never called me again. That is a very funny thing. I can't imagine why he sort of let you go at that point. Let's check in, though, Bryony's confession. I think Sister Susie's sounding a little bit cross.
Well, Bryony, I really, really, really wanted to be able to forgive you because you were young and you were shy and maybe you just didn't have the confidence to say no. And you know, that's okay sometimes. You'll get that confidence. But you were quite mean and you laughed at him and his dad was really mean and he'd driven all the way from another town. So maybe it would have just been better just to not give him your number in the first place. So I don't think I can forgive you, Bryony, I'm afraid.
You need to buy some decent...
I wanted to.
You need to buy some decent shoes if you're going to come around my ass.
Yeah,
my daughter. Brother from another gutter.
I did think that the payoff was going to be, and me and Nigel have been married for 30 years. Unlucky.
And he's still boring.
Yes. You'd have to have a heart of stone not to be on Nigel's side for this. But in the words of Two Unlimited, no, there's no limit to Bryony's pride. Oh, yes, indeed. Definitely
Really?
forgiven.
What?
Yeah.
I'm not...
I
don't understand.
No, definitely works, Suze. Just go with it.
Too Limited were referenced kind of obliquely
Yeah, they were.
very early
Fab,
on.
what a callback that was.
Yeah.
Superb.
Well, Matt's enjoying it.
Worth every penny.
Anyway, 61054, do you forgive Bryony? Yes or no? You've heard the studio verdict. 61054, you start your message with Simon. You can email simon@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Do you forgive Bryony? Yes or no? People's verdict, over to you. We did have Bryony's confession. I think she treated Nigel rather badly myself.
Yeah.
And strung him along and then hid and then laughed at him whilst Nigel was getting, a little bit of an ear wagging from the fantastic dad who sounded like Ray Winston.
He did.
Because that was
Funnily
the stage
enough.
direction. Anyway, the people's verdict, here it comes.
So Ken says, definitely not forgiven. Having been stood up by a girl who got her sister to tell me she was ill, I subsequently found out she'd travelled the length of the country to visit her ex. Should have done the decent thing face to face.
Charming.
Nigel says, with reference re Bryony, usually agree with the Oracle, Matt, and today ain't an exception. Should have done the right thing, Bryony, guilty. But Catherine says, forgiven. I used to give my number out to boys all the time back in the day. I'd use a fake name and my real number. When they called the house, my mum knew if they asked for Donna to check with me, if I could remember who they were, I'd take the call. If I couldn't, mum would just tell them, Donna doesn't live here anymore.
Very good, very good. It's a good plan. Thank you very much for that. If you have a confession for us, maybe that's made you think of an incident in your own past. You send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. If we use it, you get a smart speaker.